This video is brought to you by Surfshark VPN. Stick around to the end of the video for a special offer they're making available through my channel. The RTS genre ain't what it used to be, and let me tell you, it used to be something. I grew up on that shit. Games like Command & Conquer and Red Alert, Total Annihilation, all the Warcrafts, all the StarCrafts, Age of Empires, Age of Mythology, hell, even Sacrifice from Shiny. Remember that one? Damn shame if you don't, that one was well ahead of its time. There was, of course, one other series that I didn't list there that many of us still hold a candle for, and that series is Homeworld. Homeworld 1 and 2 weren't my favorite RTS games when I played them 2 decades ago. I was always more of a Red Alert man myself, but there was something really unique and really special about Homeworld. Functionally, it was very similar to many of the other RTS games in that you build units, you drag boxes over them and clicked on other stuff to issue attack or move orders, but Homeworld played out in 3D space rather than the strict linear plane of pretty much every other RTS game. That immediately made Homeworld feel incredibly immersive because that's how warfare in space would actually play out. It also absolutely nailed its visual design and soundscape. Its units had an understated simplicity that no doubt made them easier to render, but also made them look more like the actual spaceships we might one day build, rather than the more fantastical unit design you'd see in something like StarCraft or whatever. And the sound, man, like no one cares that there's no sound in space when it sounds this good. The low, dispassionate radio chatter of the pilots, the muted laser burst or torpedo fire sounds of battle, the percussion-led music alluding to something ancient and terrestrial and tribal as you took that endless war from the sands of Carrick into the stars. Homeworld 1, Cataclysm, and Homeworld 2 were released in the late 90s and early 2000s, and then the franchise went dormant for around a decade until Gearbox started taking interest, obtaining the rights, releasing Homeworld 1 and 2 Remaster in 2015, and then working with developer Blackbird Interactive to deliver Homeworld Deserts of Carrick in 2016. Since that time, a section of Blackbird has been working on Homeworld 3, the first numbered entry in the series in over 2 decades, and I'll tell you what, it really does feel amazing to be playing Homeworld again, even though some aspects of Homeworld 3 miss the mark or are a little disappointing. On the miss the mark front, performance is pretty patchy, even when playing on a top-end PC with a 4090 and an AMD Ryzen 9 5950X. While playing at 4K, medium settings, ray tracing off, frame rates will regularly drop down to 25 FPS when the unit count is high, but to be honest, that doesn't really hurt the experience all that much because Homeworld plays very slowly, so while these frame drops are annoying, they're nowhere near as disruptive as they'd be in a melee action game or a shooter, or even a faster moving real-time strategy game. On the more disappointing side of things, the campaign is not great. Story is not good, it's part personal, familial drama crossed with some very unwieldy lore that's true to the series, but it just doesn't ring my bell, and feels rather incongruent with the rest of Homeworld's style and tone. Campaign difficulty is also an issue. You can absolutely play it on hard mode for sure, and I'd recommend doing that, because playing it on normal mode, as I did, it's a total joke. It is absurdly easy, to the point where the impact of so many of the game's scenarios and mechanics were dulled by how easy it was for me to build, maintain, and upgrade my fleet, just brute forcing my way through everything. But outside of that stuff is stuff like the new roguelike game mode, which I think is a fantastic addition to the package for multiple reasons, even if that mode also requires some further tuning and improvements. For me though, and it's kind of weird to describe it, but I really feel as though Blackbird have nailed many of the fundamentals of what it should feel like to play a Homeworld game. Visuals, sound, UI, formations, music, especially the music. It just feels so authentic and lovingly crafted. There's clearly so much reverence for the source material here, and with that in place, I'm really confident about where this game will end up after it receives some more updates, and when the community gets their hands on it and starts building modded campaigns and multiplayer modes. Like the motherships the series is based on, Homeworld 3 has left its drydock with the essentials in place, but now it's time for upgrades in the field, and to build around it that fleet of supporting ships that will help carry it across the stars. From what I've played, the first leg of Homeworld 3's journey has been a bit of a shaky one, but I'm very optimistic about where it'll eventually end up.
Battle? Delve can kill you just as fast as hard vacuum. They need you to bury yours so they can overcome theirs.
Retrieve the cores. Dismantle them, if you must. Whatever it takes to keep them from her.
Homeworld 3 harkens back to the era when RTS games had elaborate storylines that mainly unfolded in between missions with big flashy CG cutscenes. It's nice to get back to that format, to be honest, though I do think that the money spent on these cutscenes, and I'm gonna guess it was a lot, probably could have been better spent. For as flashy as all of these look, the story side of Homeworld 3 is a bit of a mess. At least I think so, as someone who has played the previous games but never enjoyed them for their story. See, Homeworld is based on the idea that a group of people discovered interstellar travel and were effectively punished for it, their planet destroyed by a hostile race, and those remaining aboard the interstellar mothership were the last of their kind, making the ship an ark on a quest to find a new homeworld. That was the story of the first game, and it made a lot of sense and it felt fairly grounded. In the second game, things got a lot more unwieldy. There's lots of different factions and politics involved, and it's quite dense. It's also got this sort of mystical dimension to it, and that's where it starts to lose me. The hyperdrive cores that power interstellar travel are treated as religious relics, and there's prophecies about what happens when all three of these come together. It's very common for sci-fi to combine cold, hard, agnostic futurism and technology with various flavors of mysticism. Think Star Wars or Dune, which are basically the same thing, but it's a tricky balance to marry those two things, and I was always more drawn to the sci-fi elements of Homeworld than to its quasi-religious elements. Homeworld 3 adds a new dimension to this saga, and it's one of family. The woman who originally discovered the hyperdrive cores on Carrick, her name was Rachel Sajet. She had a daughter named Karen Sajet, and Karen would go on to become the organic central computer in command of the first mothership. Homeworld 3 begins when Karen's ship goes missing, and so her protege, Imogen Sajet, now has to bind with a newly constructed mothership to go out in search of Karen. A lot of the story then is centered on Imogen and how she reckons with her lineage, with the women that preceded her accomplishing so much for their people, and Imogen wondering if she can do the same thing. It's quite personal and introspective at times, probably a little too much. Perhaps the story would have hit a lot harder had I played Homeworld 1 and 2 again recently, but I hadn't. I hadn't played them since back in the day, and I'd forgotten so much about the world and lore. There is a handy intro video playable from the menu that brings you up to speed on the basics, but even then, this story is very strongly linked to people and events that you last saw over 20 years ago, and while that's likely to please enthusiasts, I think it also may see many people scratching their heads trying to remember, or just totally incapable of remembering since they never experienced the original chapters for themselves. Separate from all of that, it's just kind of messy. There's a real absence of notable antagonists, with various enemy ship commanders appearing on radio comms full of bluster and then dying like 5 minutes later. There's definitely a lot of that mysticism kind of thing. Imogen is constantly having visions that look really impressive as cutscenes, but don't really leave much of an impression on you. There's also an overall lack of characters. It's pretty much just Imogen and her intel commander speaking back and forth at one another most of the time. It's 12 missions long, and when I rolled credits, I really had to think hard about what had just happened in terms of the plot. I remember the missions really vividly, but all the stuff that happened between them just seemed like a bit of a blur. I think Homeworld 3's narrative was just too ambitious for 12 missions. It's got a search for Karen Sajet and her mothership, it's got the teething issues of the new mothership under Imogen's command, it's got this intel commander who doesn't trust Imogen and he's questioning her orders, it's got Imogen who's trying to overcome her own insecurities, it's got an antagonist who has grand plans that I won't spoil, it's got other factions you bump into along the way, it's got that mystical MacGuffin chase going on, and it's got these smaller stories playing out in each mission, like the need to escape an asteroid field, or the need to take down enemy defenses on a suicide run with a squadron of fighters. It's a lot, and spread as thin as it is, none of it feels properly fleshed out, well handled, or well delivered. And this is just a personal thing, but I also just don't think it feels quite right for this game. And what I mean by that is, if I was to show you gameplay of Homeworld and ask you to guess what sort of storyline does this game have, you'd probably guess something like The Expanse. Something political, militaristic, hard sci-fi. Homeworld 3 is actually very soft sci-fi, where Karen is constantly having visions about this or that, and every enemy you encounter is possessed of a detached religious fervor, and manipulating space-time is more akin to magic than science. Your mileage may vary, of course, maybe you'll love this stuff, but ultimately I think Blackbird expended a huge amount of resources to create visually striking and beautifully directed cutscenes without having the right script underneath all of that to ensure those big cinematic moments have their desired impact. So that's the story side of the campaign experience, but how does it actually play?
Queen's control of hyperspace is beyond anything possible.
Hostile frigate down.
Frigate in range. Enemy frigate
On your track.
Gunnery maintain
Priority alert. High strike craft losses being reported.
Target eliminated.
Homeworld 3 has 12 campaign missions, and broadly speaking, they're good, well-designed missions that each offer something unique, such that no two missions feel alike. You're never just floating in space, pumping out a bunch of units, and then, right-clicking on a target to end things. You're sending out probes to chart uncharted regions. You're capturing recon towers to give you map dominance. You're moving massive power cells back into place to bring a hypergate back online. You're trying to navigate an asteroid field which will tear your fleet apart if you aren't properly using cover, etc, etc. Each scenario you step into is new and memorable. I actually remember most missions really vividly for how distinct each new playable space was, how unique and multi-phased each operation was. Missions almost always ask you to complete more than one objective, and you can often do those at the same time if you're organized enough with your micro. That was nice, and it creates an elevated skill ceiling in the campaign experience. And by God, does it need that, because playing on normal mode, as I did, is laughably easy. So first of all, yes, there is a hard mode. You absolutely should play it on that. Even if you've never played Homeworld before, even if you've never played a strategy game before, even if you've never played a video game before, you should play it on hard mode, because the difficulty in normal mode is totally balked. It is so easy that it really neuters so much of what this scenario design and the game mechanics were aiming at. There's a bunch of reasons for this, but the main one is that Homeworld has this really great feature where you keep your fleet from mission to mission. It's a holdover from the first game where, since your mothership was the last ship holding the last of your people, it felt thematically right for the fleet you constructed to also stay with you throughout that whole journey. So that's a great conceit, love it. The problem is that resources are so plentiful and so easy to get. Enemies do not pressure you nearly enough while you're turtling, and are not numerous enough to pressure you while you're attacking, and so you basically get an early advantage in mission 1, and you snowball that right the way through to the credits. You just fight this really uninteresting game of attrition where you throw forces at the enemy, and whatever is lost you can immediately replace. When you can play that way, it makes irrelevant so many of the deeper and more sophisticated game systems on offer here. There's complex formations, stances, there's activatable abilities for each ship type, there's cover you can use, there's weaknesses on the back of larger ships, so positioning matters. Some units have stealth cloaks allowing you to spring surprise attacks, but you just never need to do any of that when the enemy never puts up a real fight and when you never run out of resources. It also really devalues the progression path for each unit. As you progress in the campaign, new upgrades will become available for each ship type, so things like more damage, health, etc., and also stuff like those activatable abilities I mentioned earlier. These things should feel like important decisions where you're trading away vital and scarce resources for upgrades. But because you have endless resources all the time, you just click that upgrade button as soon as it appears. And because the game is never difficult enough, you actually don't feel the impact of these improvements either. I know at this point some people are like, dude, why are you complaining so much about normal mode when hard mode exists? Well, the fact is, I played it on normal because I believe firmly that normal mode should be the default level of challenge. I mean, that's what most people are going to go with when they boot this up, right? And I'm not some fucking high APM Korean StarCraft pro. I would go as far as to say I'm probably a below average RTS player at this point, given that I don't play this genre very often now, but I was bored during this campaign because of how much this difficulty setting took the fun out. Let me put it this way. Last year, I played Minecraft Legends, another game made by Blackbird Interactive. That is a game specifically aimed at children, and it was significantly more challenging than this was. Significantly. Does that sound right? It does not sound right. When the difficulty dial is turned back up, Homeworld 3 really starts to sing, because you're then forced to engage its more intricate elements. You can do that in the campaign by playing it on hard mode, but you can also do it in the newly added game mode called War Games, a mode that is a really fantastic addition to the franchise, but is also held back by some really key oversights.
Alert, strike craft losses mounting.
So, as a basic setup, there's now a new game mode in Homeworld 3 called War Games, and it's a PvE co-op roguelite. You can play solo, but you can also host public or private sessions, and so you and a mate can go into randomly generated PvE scenarios. Different map and different objective each time you boot it up. One time it's an escort mission, and another time it's a target destruction mission, etc. You complete one objective on one map and immediately hyperjump out of there, taking your fleet with you into the next scenario. At that point, you're awarded random perks that you can apply to your fleet. So for example, you might unlock one that increases the range of your interceptors, or another that increases the damage of your frigates. But in that same instance, you might also get the option to upgrade your interceptors again, allowing you to do some on-the-fly build craft prioritizing specific unit types for production within the limited unit cap because you've put those perk points into them. Finishing the mission gives you experience which unlocks new starter fleets in subsequent runs, as well as various cosmetic options like emblems or whatever. There are also additional difficulty modifiers that you can pile on, really just for the fun of it, because the rewards for doing so don't really matter. But yeah, you can really jack the difficulty a lot, so what the campaign lacks in challenge, it more than makes up for it here. So that's what Wargames is/are, and I'll say right off the top that a PvE roguelite mode for an RTS game is a genius addition. I've never really enjoyed RTS multiplayer because I was never good enough, and anyone who's played competitive RTS will tell you how stressful it is, how steep the learning curve is, how much time you need to invest just to keep your head above water. At the same time, playing straight PvE skirmish also isn't super fun because you learn the quirks of the AI and you learn your build order, and all of it kind of coalesces into something that starts to feel pretty repetitive. So along comes something like Wargames. It's a random map every time you play, it's a random objective each and every round you complete, it's random perk rewards which will prompt you to adapt your build priority and strategies, which in turn creates more variety in combat encounters. It's really cool, to be honest, and it's no wonder that this game mode will be the focus point of Blackbird's future content plans for Homeworld 3. They've shown us a roadmap that has DLC drops over the coming year. They deliver things like new perk upgrades, new challenges, new factions, new starting fleets, and new cosmetics. All of that is exclusive to Wargames. So all of this is cool, but here's the kicker, and it's such a disappointment. For whatever reason, Blackbird have not implemented a pause or save feature for this game mode while playing solo. I can sort of understand why you might do this for co-op, but we can pause and save co-op games. I mean, the technology exists. But to not be able to pause or save when playing solo, I mean, the rounds aren't meant to go for that long, but they go long enough where if I had to get up to answer the door and I was attacked and my run was ruined while I was away, I would be pissed. I had this game for about 10 days, and on many occasions over that time, I thought to myself, I'd love to play a round of Wargames right now. But because I couldn't guarantee that I wouldn't be interrupted during that time, like not even for a phone call, and because I had no option to save midway through my run, I didn't play because I just didn't want to waste my time. I reached out to Gearbox about this, and a representative did confirm that this is working as intended and there are no plans right now to change how this works. So yeah, just buyer beware. Blackbird is about to go through the same thing that every other game does that should have offered a pause option but didn't. Everyone's going to complain, and they're going to be like, we've heard your feedback, and then they'll patch it in, I guarantee it. It's a shame, because Wargames is so good and so clever and so enjoyable, and that's ultimately because on balance, I think Blackbird have made a pretty solid game here, and given how much nitpicking I've done throughout this video, I really want to finish on that point. So yeah, the story isn't great, but the cutscenes look incredible. The campaign scenario design is excellent, but it is undermined by difficulty tuning. And Wargames is wonderful, but you can't pause or save it. It is a mixed bag, but not in the most essential elements. Not in the stuff that Blackbird really needed to nail if they were to carry this franchise forward. In that regard, Homeworld 3 is very accomplished. Visually, it looks stunning in its own unique, blocky Homeworld way. There's a cleanness to the ship designs that keeps them looking iconic. If you zoom in on them, the amount of detail on each unit is so impressive, and each one of them will carry permanent battle scars as they survive subsequent encounters. The environments you're fighting in are also equally strong in their artistic design, and they also play really well as combat arenas, full of cover points, trenches to utilize as thoroughfares, choke points to press through or defend, or vast expanses to communicate the sense of scale that dwarfs even these mammoth motherships. The hygiene factors of good RTS design also seem to be in place, though I will say that the community will come to their own conclusions about that after far more rigorous and widespread testing. For me, unit pathing was good. Units did what I told them to do. Enemy AI was solid. The formation system works extremely well, as does the stance system, allowing me to tweak how my units behave without me having to micromanage them all the time. The control scheme for all this was excellent, full of intuitive shortcuts and user experience options that allowed me to command quickly and efficiently, fighting the enemy rather than fighting the controls. The soundscape is just, oh man, it is so good. It's one of the main reasons I love Homeworld as much as I do. The ambient sounds of engine fire, radio chatter, and combat are so pitch perfect. Muted, cold, and distant when the quiet of space enshrouds you, but thunderous and booming when the beam weapons are firing or a capital ship energy core collapses.
Ready to copy.
Recon production complete.
Enemy frigate turning in. Enemy frigate contact. Damage nearing critical. Enemy frigate engaging.
See, unlike those other RTS games I listed at the start of this video, Homeworld is a vibe. It really is. It's slow and quiet and cold, and that's what most of us really remember Homeworld for. It was always a great, well-made RTS, but when we think of Homeworld, the first thing that comes to mind was what it felt like to play it, a feeling that no other game could quite match. Blackbird Interactive really understood that, and they were true to that here. I felt that thing again, and so while I do have gripes about this experience, and it's clear that it's still got a ways to go on a few key fronts, I definitely enjoyed my time with this, and I'm really keen to check back in on it in 6 to 12 months time when some of those basic fixes are in, when the Wargames mode gets additional content and that pause feature, and when the modding scene gets going. This game actually ships with a menu for mods, by the way, like that's just baked right in there in the main menu from day dot, so Blackbird Interactive have put that scene front and center, and with what Blackbird have built here, I expect the modding scene will create some really great stuff. As for when you choose to jump into Homeworld 3, that really depends on your familiarity with the series, your excitement for a new entry, your curiosity to dive in for the first time, or your ability to wait patiently for improvements. It really does depend, and that's why there's no recommendation in the title of this video. Bottom line though, this is definitely one worth paying attention to, either with a purchase now or a wishlist for later, and I personally am just really glad to see Homeworld back. You ever lose your wallet with all your credit cards in it, and then you have to cancel those cards because who knows who'll find that wallet and what they'll do with it? Well, guess what? Your cards are probably all over the internet right now. Not the physical cards, mind you, just the numbers, but that's all hackers need to be able to start skimming money from you in ways you might not even notice for months. In 2024, we can't just trust every website we're shopping on to keep our data safe. We have to take our own steps to protect our data, otherwise these sorts of hacks and scams are inevitable. Surfshark VPN is the best means of protecting your online data, your passwords, your IP addresses, your personal information. Surfshark VPN encrypts your online data, protecting you from identity thefts and hacks, and their Clean Web feature automatically blocks over 1 million known malicious websites, phishing methods, and other threats. You know those chains you can get that stop pickpockets from stealing your wallet? Surfshark is like that, but for your internet wallet. Surfshark means you can browse and shop online with confidence. You can use Surfshark on multiple devices at once, which is something that almost no other VPN allows. It's available on pretty much every platform you can think of. It has 24/7 customer support, and it has a full 30-day money-back guarantee. Best of all, they're offering a special offer to viewers of this channel, giving you a bonus 3 months free when you use offer code SKILLUP at checkout. That's 3 bonus months free when you use offer code SKILLUP over at surfshark.deals/skillup. Thanks Surfshark for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.